Tiana was full of energy and cheerful as she drove to her interview on this lovely day. Her situation quickly changed, though, when she was stopped by a police officer for having broken brake lights. Then she videotaped him in secret. It will shock you what he did. Welcome to USA Stories channel. Do not forget to subscribe and activate the bell button to receive all new updates. Now let's go to the story. Tiana drove through the crowded streets on her route to her interview on a bright and beautiful morning. She was tightly gripping the wheel and navigating the car through the early traffic, bobbing her head in time to the music coming from the audio. This was the first positive news she had heard in a long time, and as she drove, she grinned to herself. She'd been waiting a long time for a day like this, and now that it was finally here and she was on the verge of having it, she was overcome with joy. Nothing could go wrong at all because so much work had gone into getting her ready for this day. She was prepared for whatever the day had in store for her. The morning was going to take a severe turn that Tiana was sadly not prepared for. She was shocked to notice a siren's blinking lights in her rearview mirror when she happened to peek at it while driving. Perplexed, she questioned whether they were police. When she turned to face the side mirror nearest her, she saw the police car that was pursuing her closely. The sound of sirens going off suddenly filled the air. The officer was now proactively requesting that she stop. She attempted to restrain herself and held fast to the wheel. She was baffled as to why she was being stopped. She was aware that she had traveled below the speed limit, and she was at a loss for what may make the police stop her. She worried if she would be late for the interview and felt a terrible sense. Tiana eventually stopped and pulled over to the side of the road. All she wanted to do was finish it and move on. She saw the policeman approach her car with her side mirror as he got out of the car. Without delay, she fumbled in the glove box to retrieve her paperwork. She quickly communicated her need to the police officer by holding them out to him as soon as he stopped next to her window. She was shocked to learn that the policeman had not taken the documents from her. It wasn't the reason he'd pulled her over, he reminded her, so put everything back in the glove box. Tiana gave him a shocked look. She then carefully put the papers back. As she attempted to think of anything that may have caught the police officer's eye, her thoughts were racing. Glancing around, she spotted the name pinned on his chest. The text said, "Officer Jason." She asked the man, keeping her voice down, what she had done wrong for him to pull her over. After giving her a quick inspection, he informed her that her taillights were broken and would not turn on while she was driving. Tiana's mood declined even more while he talked to her, because she came to the horrifying realization that Jason was going to put her on hold. Tiana's interactions with the police have never actually been extensive. She didn't really start interacting with them until she acquired her first automobile. But even then, their interactions were usually fleeting and nothing significant ever occurred. She was experiencing a serious problem with a police officer for the first time, and she didn't understand why it had to occur on the day of her interview. It seemed as though the elements were conspiring against her to foil her schemes. Tiana was excited about this interview for more reasons than simply the fact that she would be getting a job at last. She was going to make significant financial sacrifices for her parents, which was another reason. She desired to assume parental duties for her younger siblings. This included education, food, and other necessities. The family was currently going through a pretty tough time, so she wanted to help them out. After her mother was injured in an accident, the family's medical expenses accounted for the majority of their income. The family was penniless, and her father was having difficulty making ends meet by the time her mother was released from the hospital. Eventually, he had to work more than one job to keep things going. However, it never seemed like enough, regardless of how hard he worked or how much money he made. All of it seemed little in comparison to the family's mounting mountain of expenses. Tiana had been at home throughout this time since she had left her prior work to assist in caring for her mother while she was in the hospital. Observing their financial struggles led her to make the decision to return to the workforce. She originally thought about going back to her previous employment. She was accepted back, albeit at a salary that was somewhat higher than her previous one. It was unjust. She understood that accepting the job would not fix anything since it was just too little for her and her family, and it was just barely above the minimum wage. She soon began looking for work. Despite attending many seminars and interviews since the start of the year, she had not received any positive feedback. All of them assured her that they would contact her again, and that was all. She never gave up looking, and they never responded to her. However, she remained upbeat despite not receiving any answers. Rather, it profoundly inspired her. She wanted to make sure she was prepared since she knew a call from someone would come at some point. She made sure that her clothing were always ready to go on demand. It was not just cleaned and dried. In addition, it was carefully folded, ironed, and put in a reachable spot. Not only that, but she also made sure her automobile was in excellent shape. She could easily picture herself receiving an invitation to an interview, only to find out that her car broke down and she was unable to attend. She also made sure all of her paperwork was ready and in order, since she was aware that a small issue may turn into a major one. She had figured everything out. She thought she had everything worked out perfectly. But the incident that would completely upend her big day began more than a month prior to the interview. It was the first time she had realized her taillights weren't working properly. She knew it was illegal to drive without them, so it was a major concern when they failed to activate when she applied the brakes. She brought the automobile to her mechanic after deciding to get it mended. But she didn't anticipate the kind of welcome she received there. To test the lights once they were fixed, they charged her an astounding $600. Tiana attempted to get them to lower their pricing because this was too costly. Before they could test it, they asked that she pay the amount, which she declined. Tiana ultimately had to let them go. She was unable to thoroughly test the lights once they were repaired. Furthermore, she was unaware that there was a problem with the lights since, based on her tests, they functioned flawlessly, and she thought that they were doing their job. She carried on with her life, going to interviews and submitting applications for employment. But no matter how hard she tried, it seemed like life was determined to keep her from moving on. She eventually lost hope at the lack of progress and began to think about going back to her previous job, even for the pitiful salary they were giving. She was willing to take on anything at all at that point to help the family financially. She was cooking for her mother when, seemingly out of the blue, she received an email asking her to an interview. She was informed that the interview was set for the following day and that she needed to be by 9 a.m. Tiana was thrilled to hear that she had at last received a positive reaction. She had passed the first interview if she was invited for a second one. She was so meticulous that by the next morning, her clothing were ready and ironed. She prepared herself in no time at all. She was feeling extremely positive about everything that was happening to her and herself, so she was off and running. But the moment Jason pulled her over, events took a different turn. She glanced at him incredulously as she listened to him inform her that her brake lights were broken. Since she had only corrected them a month prior, she was certain he was mistaken and informed him as such. However, he argued that just because they were broken, the vehicle wasn't fit for use on the road. When she checked herself, she discovered that her lights were out. She found it hard to believe. Angry, she gave herself a whack on the head. Even though she knew this would take longer than expected, she was still trying to do it as soon as possible. She went up to Jason and asked whether he would understand. She informed him about the shady price the technician had charged her when she had brought the car in for the same issue. After she finished, Jason just remained silent for a moment. Then he abruptly ordered her to unlock her trunk. This was an unusual request that took her by surprise. She was mistaken in her assumption that he would alter his mind and let her leave after hearing her narrative. She let out a defeated sigh, opened the trunk, and observed him making his way to the back of the vehicle. But she immediately followed him and took out her phone. In an attempt to conceal her actions, she turned on her camera and started to capture every action Jason took. She simply wasn't comfortable with the course that things were going in. She was shocked to learn that Jason had done nothing dubious. He proceeded to work on the brake lights instead. His sole means of accessing, he begged her to open the trunk since that was the only way he could get to them. He tried to figure out what was wrong for a few minutes, going from one brake light to the next. He then instructed her to turn on the car's lights and start it up. She followed his instructions, but the lights didn't turn on. She immediately opened the bonnet when he requested her to. He headed there to do some more tweaking. As he worked his way through the contents of her hat, Tiana could only hear faint thuds and clicks from where she was standing, videotaping the entire event. Then, he gave up after 10 or so minutes. It was evident that the problem was not a little one. The lights were just not turning on. He had now witnessed firsthand that Tiana had definitely received subpar service. She was incensed to hear this from him, as it meant she had been duped by the mechanic. She was certain that the reason was because, although having paid them in full for that specific task, they performed dreadful work for her, and she refused to test the lights for $600. About half an hour later, Jason made the decision to release her. Driving without lights puts her and other drivers in risk. Therefore, he advised her to install them as soon as possible. She said she would fix it the next day. After that, she quickly got into the car and left. She was afraid she would be late because 30 minutes had passed. Even in her haste, Tiana didn't go above the speed limit. She made easy work of the traffic, and she didn't stop until she arrived at the company's parking lot. She felt ready for the interview and went in with a strong sense of confidence, which paid off. She received an offer of employment after the interview went well. Tiana was amazed by her good fortune. She had overcome all odds to land the position in spite of all that had occurred to her and all the challenges she had encountered. She joyfully told her family the news when she arrived home. For them, it was the start of a new chapter in their story because there were a lot of changes in store for the home. Tiana remained awake that night, long after everyone else had gone to bed, thinking about Jason and everything he had done for her. She was aware that other police officers would have immediately written her up instead of taking the time to hear her side of the story. She came to the realization that she couldn't just remain silent about Jason's admirable actions. She felt compelled to inform everyone about it and highlight his excellent police work. Tiana then uploaded the footage of Jason that she had shot online. She discussed everything that had transpired and how he had assisted her in the caption. The post went viral in a matter of hours. The post received a lot of likes and shares, and the nice police officer was the talk of the town. A few days later, Tiana's post was retweeted by Jason's affiliated station. They reminded her that they were dedicated to servicing the community's residents and thanked her for the kind message. Their duties extended beyond apprehending lawbreakers and fining drivers who broke the law. Their primary responsibility was to serve, and Jason had merely been carrying out his job. Their reaction increased the story's popularity, and local TV and radio stations quickly started to broadcast the news. They made contact with her and extended invitations for interviews. She was at a really lovely place at this time. One thing she never got tired of talking about was the kind deed that Jason had performed for her. People in her community were afraid of the police because they believed that one small error may have disastrous consequences. That was the reason she had been dubious about Jason in the first place. But he'd surprised her by deciding to go above and above for her. She was content with everything, particularly the fact that decent people still existed. She was motivated by Jason's actions, which served as a reminder that no matter how terrible things became, there would constantly be cause for optimism for mankind. That conviction was like a lifeline to her. What a lovely tale. Who would have imagined Jason acting like that? In Tiana's situation, how would you have responded? Tell us in the comments section below. It is important to constantly treat mental health with respect and not to minimize it. This is a tale of a 6-week-old who became an orphan the moment both of his parents passed away unexpectedly. 24-year-old Clayton Osteen was a member of the SWAT squad while serving in the U.S. Marine Corps. He was an excellent military guy who gave his nation his all while doing his job with distinction. His career was taking off until he unexpectedly chose to go in a different direction than most people had anticipated. He made the decision to leave the Corps and join a different security force branch. According to the words of his closest friends, Clayton aspired to be a sheriff. Wanting to work among citizens, he joined the local police enforcement department, and guess what? He was quite good there too. He started working for the St. Lucie County Sheriff's Office in November 2019. Among his contemporaries, Clayton enjoyed great popularity and respect, making him a valuable addition to the police as a deputy sheriff. He received recognition for his achievements a year after he joined the force. Clayton received 2 honors from his prestigious department: the Deputy of the Quarter for December 2020 and the Deputy of the Year 2020 overall. Isn't that remarkable? According to Sheriff Ken Mascara, Clayton was among our finest cops. His Marine experience was priceless, and he was a bright light to us. However, he was not just a good police officer. He was also a great man who was well respected by everybody and humble and honest. It was the reason he was adored by everybody. Everything was going great, and then the best part happened. He met the love of his life. About a year after Clayton, in February 2020, Victoria Pacheco also joined the force. Many people characterize her as a passionate law enforcement officer who was vivacious, sincere, honest, and badass. She graduated from South Fork High School in 2016 and attended Indian River State College prior to joining the police department. It was love at first sight for these 2 deputies. The 2 began dating a few weeks after they first crossed paths. They were a great fit, since it's not often that you meet someone who wants to succeed in the same industry as you and has the same hobbies. In my opinion, Clayton and Victoria's tale demonstrates how you may just know when you're with the perfect person. You just go for it without thinking twice, since you might not come across that sort of person again. And the Deputy of the Year 2020 accomplished precisely that. He proposed months after they first started dating, getting down on one knee. She replied yes, of course. The couple's relatives and a few co-workers attended the little ceremony where they exchanged vows. Bernice Bartolini, Victoria's grandmother, called the narrative a fairy tale. She referred to Clayton and her granddaughter as Romeo and Juliet of the present day. They had a promising future ahead of them and were the ideal pair. The young couple also yearned for their own children. Fortunately, the young woman became pregnant quickly, and they experienced no issues with infertility. They would be the finest parents a child could have, Bernice said. I have no doubt about that. Because Clayton is a bright and well-behaved youngster, I adore them both. Victoria had her first ultrasound scan 12 weeks into her pregnancy. According to the scan findings, the deputy sheriff was carrying a boy. The doctor informed the thrilled parents that their kid was in excellent condition. It had always been Clayton's dream to have his kid born before December, to spend their first Christmas together as a family, and that's precisely what took place. In November of 2021, Victoria had birth. Despite being on duty, her spouse managed to return home in time for a last-minute trip to the hospital. She gave birth without any issues, and the medical staff assisted in the birth of JC. Clayton was quite pleased, as was his wife. He finally had the family he had always wanted, which was a dream come true. The new mother and her young son were released from the hospital a few days later. But on New Year's Eve, after celebrating Christmas as a family, an unexpected event occurred. Before midnight on New Year's Eve, the deputies responded to a 911 call, according to a news statement issued by Sheriff Mascara. They were all surprised to learn that this caller was someone they knew. After her husband attempted suicide, Victoria was forced to make the call. Clayton was not on duty at the time of this occurrence. When the St. Lucie County Sheriff's Office learned that one of their own officers had tried suicide, they were all in disbelief. The father of one was, happily, still with us. After being taken to the closest hospital, physicians had to put him on a life support system in order to preserve his survival. When they learned what had happened, everyone in their community was taken aback. A lot of people in Lucie County thought Clayton had it all. He and his wife were ambitious and their jobs were moving forward quickly. He was also happy becoming a parent 2 days after the event on January 2nd. He was still in the same state. After his family removed him from life support, Clayton ascended to a higher plane of existence. Victoria, his wife, was distraught. She could hardly fathom her life without him since she loved him so much. This female police officer terminated things on her own 2 days after her spouse passed away. Even though it is somewhat unfortunate that Jace was left an orphan, a great thing happened. He would now receive all the assistance required to have a nice life. Bernie expressed her sorrow for her granddaughter by saying, "My heart is so sad. I believe that my pain was prior to the death of my lovely granddaughter. Romeo and Juliet's story is sad. They will always be together now. While I resided in Florida, Victoria and I had a close relationship. I wish I could have been there for her, but she was there for me. I'm really pleased with my grandchild. She was a great person for the few times she was here. Vicky was a nice mother as well as a skilled worker. Nobody knows why this occurred. She really did make a difference, and I really do miss her. But right now, Jace is the most significant thing to all of us. As sheriff, I saw these two deputies as young, ambitious, and a great compliment to my already amazing group of professionals, Sheriff Mascara said of the couple. It's simple for the public, and occasionally even for me, to see police enforcement as superhuman, but we must remember that they are people too. In addition to the daily stress that all of us experience, law enforcement personnel also handle the tension of the people they serve in our community, which can occasionally be quite difficult. Clayton was a brilliant young guy who was also really witty and motivated. Not only will we all remember the pair for their outstanding military service, but also for the wonderful individuals they were. Recall that I mentioned that the small kid experienced something extraordinary from all of this? Friends of the family created a GoFundMe page for the youngster. Tragically, on December 31st, 2021, Clayton took his own life for reasons that are entirely unknown and completely out of character. The page read 2 days later, still reeling from the blow of her loss, Victoria committed suicide. In order to support baby Jace moving forward, the nation and community must come together. Additionally, they requested that the public assist in gathering necessities for baby Jace, including gift cards, diapers, wipes, and formula. And what do you know? Jace now has more than a year's worth of infant formula. However, the resounding backing doesn't stop there. The goal of the fundraising website is to raise $10,000. The page currently has over $120,000. Isn't that incredible? Jace will now have access to funding for all of his requirements. The Best Deputy Award has been given to his parents in recognition of their consistent service and moral behavior. In a somber burial, they were buried side by side in caskets wrapped with the American flag. Numerous deputies from the St. Lucie County Sheriff's Office in Florida, as well as friends and relatives, saluted their coffins as they passed past. How do you feel about the tale of this couple until we meet again? Her husband passed away before he could see the infants when the wife went into delivery. Then, an even more terrible incident occurred during the man's burial. Ivan Saku was a conscientious and moral person. He avoided difficulties of any type and thought he had a promising future, but very quickly, events transpired that were completely different from his expectations. At 26, Ivan knew exactly what he wanted out of life and put a lot of effort into reaching his objectives. It was obvious to everyone that he was a workaholic. Gordon, his closest buddy, used to make fun of him for working non-stop. "I wonder what you think will happen if you just stop and do nothing," he asked one day. "You will become so bored that you will pass out." Then both men burst out laughing. Ivan was a cheerful person who found happiness in the simplest things. Additionally, it was around this time in his life that he met Caceres, an outgoing and lively woman who would later become his girlfriend. She had an optimistic outlook on life and enjoyed to savor each day as it came. Everyone at the Juani Batista Pediatrics office, where she worked, had nothing but positive things to say about her. Because of her impeccable work ethic, Lena Nimsix, her office manager, truly thought she was indispensable. Caceres was a workaholic, much like Ivan, so it's no wonder they bonded right away. They were meant to be together. It was evident to anyone who saw them, even at a distance, that they possessed something unique. Stephanie's mother saw Ivan's special kind of love immediately when she first met her. Jani, Ivan's aunt, taunted them endlessly about it, saying things like, "You both act like no one else exists when the two of you are together." No one could have predicted that theirs would be just another tragic love story. The two were always a sight to see. Their love deepened over the years, and eventually they made the decision to move in together in the quiet, gay Renaissance apartment on North Military Trail in West Palm Beach. Neighbors envied them for their happy relationship where they resided. Their connection grew much more enriching since they now shared a home. They surprised each other with gifts, went on dates, and dressed alike. You know, love occasionally provides us with a lovely fairy tale in the midst of a regular life. This couple's relationship appeared to be a fantastic love story, but it was actually going in a very tragic path. After lunch one day, Stephanie shocked Ivan by revealing she was expecting a child. Ivan was ecstatic and couldn't wait as he instantly took on the role of his father. Wanting the best for his child, he went shopping for baby gear and did not cut any corners. He even purchased things Cáceres thought absurd because the infant wouldn't require them. Not excluded was the expectant mother either. Ivan got more involved in the household and lavished her with care. When Kalani, the baby, finally arrived, her parents could not stop showcasing her. She was the tiny angel of her mother and the little princess of her father. Regarding Ivan, he carried out his parental responsibilities with diligence and admirability. It was quite humorous and endearing to see. Their lovely family was to grow even more ideal not too long after. Cáceres became pregnant once more. If Ivan was thrilled the first time, he was ecstatic to learn they were having twins from the ultrasound this time. The family was ecstatic, but in the blink of an eye, all of their pleasure and joy disappeared. It all began on a misfortuneful morning. The quiet of the gated West Palm Beach enclave was disrupted that morning by gunfire. Doors were fastened, windows were closed, lights went out, and everyone scrambled for safety. No one was precisely sure what was going on. The shootings prompted a call to the police. Ivan's body was discovered when they arrived, having been shot many times inside his house. The area had a somber and gloomy appearance that day and was both silent and boisterous. Now severely pregnant, Cáceres was unable to even comprehend the events that had just transpired. She was too stunned to say anything when the cops tried to question her. Cáceres led Kalani into a room as soon as the catastrophe occurred and instructed her not to leave. "Mom, what's going on? Why is everyone in this place so large? Where is Daddy?" the young child sobbed. Regretfully, the tempest had just begun for her, nor were the neighbors able to provide the police with any relevant information. The sudden and rapid nature of everything left friends and family in complete disbelief. Everyone was puzzled by what had transpired. Ivan's closest friend Gordon was in shock at what had transpired. "I didn't think my dearest buddy would do this. This is not fair to anyone." He sobbed. Everyone did everything they could to comfort Cáceres, but it was ineffective. She sobbed for hours at a time. Ivan would still be alive if tears alone could bring the dead back to life. She had a lot of questions, but she was at a loss as to what Ivan could possibly have done to warrant this. He would never hurt a fly, she would constantly assure her loved ones. Her life, which had been flawless, was upended and would never be the same. Her evenings grew eerie and endless. She was surrounded by friends, neighbors, and relatives, yet she still felt empty. Her mind was filled with all the great memories she had of Ivan. She longed for everything to be a dream, anything at all, just so she could wake up and find him by her side. Unfortunately, that would never occur. Above all, she was very upset that he would never get to see the twins. He'd been dreaming about them for the last 2 months, making outlandish promises. He even mentioned the twins in his most recent Instagram post, but he never had the chance to say hello. Cáceres's body and mind were in excruciating pain while funeral arrangements were being made, but she knew she had to be strong. It was what her beloved Ivan would have wanted anyhow, for Kehlani and the twins. Cáceres went into labor 3 days after Ivan passed away, and he was sent to the hospital immediately to have a cesarean section. Ivan Jr. and Layla, her twins, were born a short while after she was taken in. Despite her heart exploding with agony, she greeted the two with the widest grin imaginable. She posted her sorrows on Facebook the day after giving birth. She wrote as follows, "I just cannot fathom how a person could have the courage to abandon 3 children, 2 of whom were never even given the opportunity to meet their father. This wasn't what they deserved. I'm making an effort not to give up, but this has had to be the hardest battle I've ever faced." Cáceres felt an inexplicable power flood her every time she gazed at the twins. Little Kehlani appeared very brave and collected for her age, having already learned by then that her father had died. Cáceres also resolved to make sure she filled the void that Ivan had left in the lives of the children. Unfortunately, Cáceres was never able to have his dream granted since life was still giving out its blows. Cáceres became quite unwell soon after the twins were born, and he was brought to the hospital. According to the physicians, she had an infection as a result of the C-section. This mom realized she had to struggle to survive on the hospital bed in order to protect her children. She was prepared to be both the kids' mother and their father. Despite her best efforts, Cáceres's health didn't get better, and she spent 10 days in the critical care unit. The next thing that transpired shocked everyone. Cáceres was still fighting for her life in the hospital on the day of Yvonne's burial. Her illness had gotten worse by the time they buried her spouse that morning. In an attempt to save her, doctors and nurses sprinted after her. Even though she knew that her life was in danger at that point, she still tried her hardest to survive. She battled until the very end, but regrettably, she was not successful. Everyone who heard the news of her passing was shocked. There were no adequate words to describe everyone's anguish. They all knew they had to be strong for the children, even if it was too much of a burden to bear. It was determined by friends and family that it was best to get past the grief and look ahead to a better future. Everyone promised to be a parent figure to the children and to look out for them. Cáceres' employer, Juan Batista Pediatrics, too had a role to play. To aid with the costs of raising the kids, they set up a GoFundMe page. Family relatives are now taking care of the children. I pray that time will mend the hearts that have been shattered, and I wish the children a lifetime of joy, love, and laughter. Officer Daniels came upon a devastating find while on a regular patrol at a nearby retail complex. He discovered a 3-year-old child sitting by herself in the far corner of the parking lot, hardly apparent among all the parked automobiles. He knelt down to her level and approached her with concern, wondering why she was alone herself. The young child said, "Mom doesn't want me home." Officer Daniels' eyes grew wide upon hearing the little girl's words. What sort of parents would act in this manner? There has to have been a miscommunication of some sort. Most likely, the girl didn't even know what she was saying. Officer Daniels made the choice to remain with the girl and protect her until her parents returned. They were most likely anxiously searching everywhere for her. "Jason is my name." "What's your name?" he said, thinking that if he gained her trust, he might be able to get some information from her. "Ella," she hesitantly answered. Jason said, "Wow, what a beautiful name," and the little girl smiled. "Let's go find your folks, Ella." "Are you aware of their location?" he said, and her smile vanished once again. "No, Mommy doesn't want me," she said, raising an eyebrow that confused Jason. "Let's go take a walk, okay?" He extended his hand to Ella, who accepted it, and the two of them entered the mall. He led her inside the control room where he briefed the on-duty information officer about the circumstances. Ella's parents were asked to come to the information center immediately after the police said Ella was gone. Ella's face sank after hearing this, and she repeated, No, Mommy doesn't want me." Unsure of what to do, Jason and the information officer exchanged worrisome looks. They made the decision to stay there a little while longer, and the officer made the statement once again. But nobody turned up. Besides, the retail mall was going to close. All that was visible on the surveillance cameras were empty hallways. "Ella, should we play a game?" Jason inquired. "The first one to see a yellow car wins." The young girl nodded and burst into a quiet chuckle. Her eyes brightened. This was the ideal method to return her to the parking lot without bringing up her parents. Every time they did that, it appeared to irritate her, Jason thought. After Ella and Jason thanked the information officer, they headed back outside. Since everyone had left the mall, there were even fewer automobiles in the parking lot than there had been before. Ella was disappointed to see that none of them were yellow. For a different reason, Jason was also dissatisfied. It was astounding to him that no one had come in search of this little girl. Ultimately, he made the decision to accompany her to the police station. There, he'd come up with an idea. It appears that this area is devoid of yellow automobiles. Ella nodded as he said, "Do you want to come with me and look somewhere else?" Jason looked at her more closely now and saw some oddities. Not only was her hair disheveled and tangled, but her hands and clothing were filthy as well. Though he was clueless about the circumstances, he could not help but notice that something odd was going on. Michelle, one of Jason's co-workers, was waiting for them outside when they got there. Though Michelle was a mother, Jason believed Ella could be better at ease in a female company. Ella was quite delighted to see Michelle's office since she also happened to have some of her daughter's stuffed animals there. Michelle took care of Ella while Jason attempted to locate her parents. He had to find them immediately. He examined every database and every report on missing persons, but he turned up nothing of use. Cop Jason Daniels examined the video that the cop from the shopping center had given them in the dark security room. As he saw a mundane automobile pull into the parking lot and stop, the video flashed. Ella, the little child, was left by herself in this situation. The automobile seemed to be a foreboding symbol of the enigma that was about to reveal itself to him. A possible clue in this mysterious case was the license plate of the automobile, which Jason saw. He typed the numbers into the database with deliberate keystrokes, and the screen flashed before displaying a depressing message. Not a match was discovered. The automobile vanished from the system completely, like to a ghost, adding to the mystery surrounding Ella's entrance. The automobile was inextricably linked to Ella, but its history remained a mystery. To follow the little hints he had to go farther. Resolved, Jason made the decision to take his quest outside of the databases and computers and into the actual world, the place where Ella's narrative first started. Jason went outside into the busy street that surrounded the mall. He went up to customers and other bystanders, holding up Ella's photo, and asked whether anyone knew her. Their expressions were a mixture of worry and interest, but none had any real knowledge about the small girl who had found herself at the heart of an increasingly intriguing story. A man, his voice laced with anxiety, answered, "Yes, I've seen her," in a tiny cafe a block away from the mall. She often wandered around here late at night, always alone. Jason felt a chill go down his spine as he described Ella's isolation throughout the quiet night. Mixed stories were given by other retailers. Some recounted seeing an Ella-like girl playing alone at strange hours. They had no idea who she was by name or anything about her parents. Their tales were shards, echoing of a kid glimpsed but unknown, contributing to the mystery that shrouded her. Once back at the police station, Ella started to act differently around Jason and Michelle. Gradually, her initial fear gave way to a cautious contentment. Ella's voice disrupted the stillness at the station during a peaceful moment. She mutely said, "There was a big house with blue doors," as she peered into the distance. Her brow furrowing in concentration, she attempted to put together the fractured recollections in an attempt to remember more. This insignificant yet striking detail provided Jason with a concrete lead in a sea of doubt, leading him down a new path in his investigation. Ella started talking more about her particular preferences as she got more at ease in the station. When she talked about her favorite toys, a set of vibrantly colored blocks and a tattered teddy bear, her face lighted up with excitement. As the days went by, Jason saw that his concern for Ella's welfare grew, watching as she gradually changed from a timid, lonely youngster to a confident, outgoing young lady. A growing sense of accountability and connectedness washed over him. There was an unseen tie between them that grew stronger every day and made him want to do all in his power to support her. Inspired by Ella's statement, Jason set out to find the blue-doored mansion. He rummaged around the forgotten areas of the community, looking for that particular color. Jason's persistence paid off in a desolate section of town. The blue-doored home Ella had described was standing there. Jason felt a chill go down his spine as he described Ella's isolation throughout the quiet night. Mixed stories were given by other retailers. Some recounted seeing an Ella-like girl playing alone at strange hours. They had no idea who she was by name or anything about her parents. Their tales were shards, echoing of a kid glimpsed but unknown, contributing to the mystery that shrouded her. The fact that the shelter was involved implied that Ella's mother had asked for assistance, pointing to more serious problems in the family that had hitherto been kept a secret. She claimed in her letter that she was sick and was unable to take care of Ella on her own. These letters' urgent and frightened tones expressed a mother's need for assistance in keeping her kids safe. Jason made the decision to pay a personal visit to the women's shelter in an effort to get additional information. When Jason got to the shelter, he accepted himself for having hard talks. The staff, understanding of his plight, revealed Ella's mother's terrible reality. Overwhelmed by her situation, she had taken sanctuary there. Their disclosure depicted a lady seeking refuge for herself and her daughter in the face of overwhelming adversity. The most devastating information Jason discovered concerned Ella's mother's fate. He was told by the shelter officials that she had died from a serious illness. Jason was very affected by this revelation, realizing the extent of the anguish Ella's mother must have had, waging a war she would inevitably lose and leaving Ella all by herself. Jason also asked Ella about her father when he was there. The personnel at the shelter knew very little, but the information they did have was not encouraging. They thought he had vanished after engaging in illicit activity. Jason realized how horribly true it was that Ella had been abandoned. Her father's disappearance followed the terrible death of her mother, leaving her all alone in the world. Ella experienced extreme vulnerability and loneliness on her travels. Jason thought it over and came to a deeply felt conclusion. He decided to take Ella in as a foster child after being moved by her tale and the relationship they had developed. It was a choice motivated by a strong sense of connection and caring, in addition to obligation. Jason started his journey through the complicated foster care system. It was a tangle of legal procedures, meetings, and paperwork. He was adamant despite the difficulties. By a stroke of luck, Jason happened to meet Ella's maternal grandparents. Ever since Ella's mother vanished, they had been looking for her. Through this revelation, Ella was able to connect with her mother and her history, which had previously been absent from her life, and learn about a previously unknown aspect of her family. Ella and her grandmother had an intensely emotional meeting. Ella saw it as the revelation of a family she was unaware she had. It marked the conclusion of a difficult and uncertain quest for her grandparents. A new family relationship formed. Tales were exchanged, tears were shed, and a hole in Ella's life was filled with love and connection. Jason, who is now Ella's godfather, reflects on their trip at the end of the narrative. He reflected on Ella's enormous influence on his life and how she had changed him in unexpected ways. His relationship with Ella was marked by compassion, difficulty, and finally love. It served as evidence of the unexpected turns life may take, as well as the transformational effect of helping others. Please remember to subscribe to our channel, give us a thumbs up, and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss any of our videos. If you enjoyed the tale, the next video that plays on your screen will probably move you too.